Hello and welcome to the RevRx podcast, where we discuss how to have success in faith, family, and health. My name is Chad Potts, and I'm your host. Today's episode is one that you're not going to want to miss because we take a deep dive into what health really looks like with Leanne Ellington. Leanne is a podcaster. She's an author. She's a self-image scientist. The work she's doing is marrying together neuroscience, health, and faith. We're going to talk about what it looks like to really be healthy. We're going to talk about the power of our thoughts in our everyday life. And we're going to discuss her story. You see, Leanne has always struggled with weight. From the time she was 8 years old, she started Weight Watchers. At one point in her life, she lost 100 pounds and reached her goal weight. But here's the thing. She didn't see herself as healthy even after she achieved all of that. And so that led her down a road to really start asking some of those deep questions about what is health really? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for others? What does that mean to you today, our listeners? So buckle up. Lots of wonderful, useful, and valuable information coming your way today with my friend, Leanne Ellington. Leanne, thank you so much for joining us today on the RevRx podcast. What a privilege it is to have you here with us today.
Yes, thank you, Chad. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, so I love the work that you're doing where you're kind of at the intersection of faith and science. And that's exactly where I find myself too.
Yes.
So immediately drawn to your work, drawn to what you're doing. But I always like to start off with, how did you get here?
Yeah.
I know you have a phenomenal story of overcoming a lot of issues, weight-related issues, mindset-related issues. So I'd just love to open the floor to allow you to tell us your journey as to how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So, who I am today is definitely a product of my experiences, my struggles, my suffering, all of it. But, I was an overweight, sedentary, couch potato kid, and I brought that with me into adulthood. And then in my early 20s, I kind of hit my enough is enough point, my first one, I should say. And through a lot of the wrong ways and maybe some of the right ways, I went on and lost close to 100 pounds.
Wow.
But because I didn't know what I didn't know, I ended up giving myself disordered eating and a horrible toxic self-image and body image to get there. But I thought I was air quotes being healthy, right? Because that's what I learned. And it's only because I didn't know anything about the self-image and the identity that keeps people stuck in the thoughts and the feelings and the behaviors that perpetuate cycles. And so when I started addressing it from that route, and without going too far down the rabbit hole, I ended up having a major spine surgery in the midst of all of this because I was just so focused on getting fit and lean and all the words that were, I was using at the time. I majorly injured myself and needed to have major spine surgery. And that spine surgery is what gave me a lot of neurological struggles afterwards. And I was scared. I was in my mid-20s. Nobody could help me. I was fearful of what my life would be like at 30, 40, 50, 60, 80. And so I had to become my own advocate. And that's what led me down the road of studying the physiological side of the nervous system to really heal my own stuff. Because it wasn't musculoskeletal, it was neural. And that's what showed me like, wow, there is this emotional part of the nervous system, the mental, the social part of the nervous system. And that's what led me to just kind of healthily obsess over studying the intricacies of the female brain, because it really helped me understand why I did what I did and why I felt this drug-like pull to food and sugar, and why even after I lost 100 pounds, did I still feel air quotes fat, and so that's really what led me to healing for me. And it wasn't available. Like the mishmash of things and modalities that I needed to do to actually heal my relationship with food, heal my relationship with my body, and step into the identity and self-image that I would need to actually stay there and keep it and live happily ever after. No one was talking about that. I was having a lot of, short-term band-aids thrown at my deeper struggles. And so I created it for myself. And then now it's there as a pathway to be there for others. And all of that was created before I had a relationship with God. So parallel to this journey is I am a bacon-loving, Hebrew-speaking Jew. who randomly walked into a church about 6 years ago now, looking for the word surrender. I was in this deep surrender. That was the word that kept coming up. But God was not, even though I grew up Jewish, it was not a connection to faith. It wasn't a relationship. It was more of a heritage and a culture and, a very proud part of my heritage, but it was not a connection to God. So when I discovered everything that was happening over in, so what I do today in to help people that were going through the same things I'm going through is my signature system is called Stressless eating, where I help women and teens take the stress, the emotion, the obsession out of food and really heal it for good by taking a self-image and nervous system and brain first approach to their struggles. But as anyone who has a faith life knows, like if you're talking about this identity and self-image conversation, it's like when you invite God into the conversation, you're like pouring gasoline on the topic, right? So because I didn't know then what I didn't know again. So then when I started intersecting, and honestly, one of the reasons that scripture and the thought process of Christianity made so much sense to me is because of what I understood about how the brain works. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of everything in the 30,000 foot overview.
Yeah, I love that. And, there's so much to unpack there for us, but I wanted to start with this concept of the fact that you've tried everything that was available to you and it just wasn't working.
Yeah.
I think that resonates so well with so many people today that are on a health journey. Of course, we know the statistics about obesity and being overweight, and this epidemic of obesity is really and truly reaching kind of a crescendo where it's like, okay, something needs to happen differently. And I really think you're on the cutting edge of what that is. But you're right. We don't know what we don't know. And I experienced a lot of the same things, up until recently as well. You try the things that are available to us. And so what the modern fitness and health industry tells us is go on this diet. And I think part of your story is that you were in Weight Watchers at what, like 8 years old, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can, the thing is, you can lose the weight, right? Diets work a large part of the time.
Yeah.
Because the number one goal of diet is to help you lose the weight. But it's the whole like after that we're seeing,
Absolutely.
Something that doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Because people lose the weight, but then and the statistics are staggering depending on where you look, but something along the lines of 95% of people at 3 years have gained back at least what they've lost, if not more.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
we're starting to see, I think the key to that is science. I think the key to that is, a lot of the neurological pathways. And so can you speak a little bit more in detail about that? Like, what do you mean by, mindset? What do you mean by checking in with your self-image and these sort of things?
Absolutely. How much time do you have? I love this conversation. So in speaking to what you said, you're right. There was, when I was at the peak of my disorder, I didn't look it from the outside. I had lost all this weight. It was I put on a very happy face, but there was so much shame. There was so much disorder. There was, the track, the way, the measure, the count, the obsession, right? Or the flip side, I was off the rails and, binge eating, emotional eating, feeling completely out of control, feeling like a drug addict, right? But then also the way I was perceiving myself and the unworthiness and the brokenness that I felt never went away. In fact, it got worse, right? And so, I did the therapy. I talked it out. I got very clear on all my daddy issues and, I got very aware of what, caused these patterns in my life. But no one was ever able to help me actually transform them so that I stopped and get the tools so that I stopped bringing my past with me into my future. Again, awareness is great, but it doesn't really make the shift in your current day behaviors, especially if it's regressing you and you're constantly going back and talking about the past, right? Every diet under the sun, and it's really just the way I describe it is every diet is really in this same paradigm, which it's this eat less, move more, harder, faster, more. And oftentimes it's at the expense of our health and at the expense of our happiness. Like you said, statistics show that 3 years and really like, let's look at even a year out, are you healthier on a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological, neurological, brain-based kind of view of health? And are you happier? Right. And, or are they really outvoting each other? The truth is that what I found is that most people are less of both. They're less healthy and less happy. Right. So something's got to give. So the way I kind of describe it is It's multiple dimensions, but it's part strategy, right? And then it's part like the stories and the self-image and the identity. And so what I mean by strategy is if you've learned, like I learned for decades, this eat less, move more, carbs are bad, fat is bad, calories are bad, depending on what day you asked me, right?
Right.
But this, track, count, weigh, measure, restrict, control, and then of course the opposite. That is, let's call that like you've metaphorically learned Spanish. Right.
Right.
And if all you know is Spanish, if I tried to talk to you about French, you wouldn't know how to speak French. So the language where you not only listen to your body, but you learn how to take care of your nervous system, you change the way that you make decisions around food. Right. And so the way I describe it, it's kind of like learning a new language and a new paradigm. Right. But that sounds very foreign to most people because they've never done it. Right.
Sure.
But the truth is that when we are stuck in that cycle, right? Most people that I talk to, they think it's a food problem. They think it's a body problem. They think it's a self-sabotage or willpower problem. But what I show them is actually, no, it's not food's not the problem. It's your thoughts about food that are the problem, or the way that you're making decisions around food. It's not about the food. It's not your body that's the problem. It's your thoughts or your shameful thoughts about your body that are the problem. Because there's somebody that weighs exactly what you weigh and doesn't have that shame. Right. Yeah. It's not, and it's not even the diet that's the problem, right? Because like you said, all diets work until they stop working, right?
Yeah.
So it's our thoughts that shape our beliefs and our behaviors. And that's what perpetuates the cycle. So yes, we need a new strategy. And the way I describe it is you kind of have to learn a new language. But first, like for this time around, let it be a language that gets easier the more you practice it, and you get better at it the more you practice it, so that you can practice it less and less and it just becomes the way that you think. Versus dieting, it doesn't get easier. It gets harder. We get worse at it. We never get good at it, right? So that's what I mean by strategy. But then it's also got to be the stories and the self-image and the thinking that you're going to need to actually make all that happen. Because like I could just straight up give you the strategy that I teach my clients. But if we don't go identify those weeds in the garden of your mind that are causing you to think that you're a failure or a self-sabotager, or you failed before you even began, or you're destined to stay this way forever, right? Yep. You are always going to end up right back where you are right now, because you can't out diet, you can't outsmart, you can't out, mindset this deeper wiring in the identity in your brain. You've got to go unwire it and rewire a new identity, a new story, because you'll never out weight loss, out diet your current self-image, right? So it's got to be a new strategy, and it's got to be the new stories and self-image. It's got to be both. And that's the part that I totally get it. It's not as sexy to some people as lose 20 pounds in 20 minutes, like the world's trying to show us, right?
Yep.
But first and foremost, if we want to get really serious about this, the first thing we have to do is identify what the problem is not. And it is not a food problem. It is not a weight problem. It is in our brain. And until we address that, we will constantly be solving the wrong problem, the wrong problem, the wrong.
That's so powerful. That is so powerful. That has the ability to set people truly free. And I can't emphasize that enough. That's why I love the work that you're doing, because
Thank you.
It's beyond what the world is doing. It's beyond what our culture is doing. It goes beyond the surface level.
Yeah.
And it digs in deep.
Yeah.
A couple of things I want to say here from what I heard with you discussing this. Number one is that I think we need to redefine health.
Amen. Amen. Yep.
For so many of us, you ask, what would it take for you to be healthy? And they would say, I need to weigh 150 pounds.
Yeah.
Or I need to weigh this or that, or I need to look a certain way. And that's not health. Health is multifactorial.
Yeah.
And odds are, unless you change the way that you think about health, unless you change the way you think about yourself and about your body, then even if you weighed 150 pounds or whatever that magic number is for you, you still won't feel healthy when you get there.
Absolutely.
I think that's very much what your story is about.
Yeah.
Is, you lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. And kudos to you, because that's not easy. But you weren't, is it healthier to be 100 pounds less?
Yeah, I was the opposite of healthy, and I was the opposite of happy. And it's everything. I did everything that I thought, the magazines I was reading growing up told me that I would feel happy and beautiful, right? But I never felt that. It's like the big lie,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly right. We see posters and billboards and ads and all this stuff. You need to look this way, and then you'll be happy. Then you'll be healthy, and that's just not the case.
Yeah.
And you're a living example of that. And I think we need to redefine how we think about health.
Amen.
You can be physically healthy and still not be healthy,
Yeah.
totally and completely and holistically.
Absolutely.
Thinking about being emotionally healthy, spiritually healthy, mentally healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And, all of that goes into it, right? We've
Yeah.
got to be healthy from a holistic perspective and not narrowly define health by the number on the scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. Yeah. And I think part of it too is like, first and foremost, we have to ask ourselves, like, is our definition of health serving us and is it not? And 9 times out of 10, it's not. And that's one of the first things I do with my clients is like, we have to kind of unbrainwash you of that mentality because it's twisted. It's distorted.
That's a good way to word it. Unbrainwash you.
Yeah.
You should coin that. Like,
I talk about it all the time. It's like, there's this unique kind of, I believe there's a unique kind of like brain damage. I'm putting that in air quotes. But we could probably find it on a brain scan as well, for sure. But like, there's a unique kind of brain damage that happens as a result of being in that diet mentality and that disorder for so long. And until we go address that, it will fester and get worse.
Right. And so then the second thing I wanted to bring up that I hear in your story is this fact that our thoughts are so much more powerful than I think we understand initially.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you go into that a little bit deeper as far as, how we speak to ourselves? We speak to ourselves so much more harshly than we would ever speak to anyone else.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves, we have these limiting beliefs. We tell ourselves, you can't do this, or you always do this, or, we make these generalizations that aren't true, but yet we believe them, don't we? What's the role of those thoughts when it comes to really and truly setting ourselves free to become totally and holistically healthy?
Yeah. What's the thoughts are everything. Like everything starts at our thoughts, right? So for example, we think that our circumstances make us feel a certain way. Oh, this is what I weigh. Therefore I'm sad. I feel shame, whatever. Right. But it's really our thoughts about our circumstances, and I use the example, I call it the tale of 2 cookies. But if I eat a cookie and I'm feeling shame, or I'm feeling like I'm doing something bad and I feel guilt, or I feel like it's wrong, right? And I'm stressed out, or because I just ate 12 of them, right? Not only does it not feel very good, but there's this whole neurological cascade that takes place internally. It's invisible. You can't even see it, right? So first of all, just our thoughts are enough to put us in that sympathetic branch of our nervous system, right? And we know the metabolic cascade, the endocrine cascade, the musculoskeletal, cardiovascular cascade. It's the opposite of health is that cascade, right?
Yep.
Just because of what we're thinking about that cookie versus same cookie, same exact experience, circumstance, but I'm just feeling peace about it, or I'm present with my cookie, or there's just the absence of drama, right? Yeah. That's enough to put me in that parasympathetic rest and digest branch of my nervous system. And that beautiful, healthy cascade happens neurologically, endocrine, cardiovascularly, gastrointestinally, you name it. And it's this beautiful, healthy cascade, right? Same cookie, 2 very different thoughts about that cookie, which are creating 2 very different experiences of that cookie. Right. It's the same for everything. Right. And so that's why it's so important for us to become aware of what we're not aware of. So many people are not even aware of the thoughts that they're thinking and how that's causing their feelings. And then they feel like a victim to their feelings. Right. Oh my gosh, I am anxiety. I am depression. They give themselves these titles, and then those titles become their self-image, and it becomes I call it a game over statement. It's like, oh, well, I am anxious, so I might as well just accept that this is who I am and deal with it. And it's no, you are literally manufacturing. And I mean this with so much love and compassion, because I'm raising my hand. This was me. The reason I discovered this is because it started with depression, but I could see it with anxiety too. I was literally manufacturing a recipe for anxiety and depression. So if you imagine it like you're mixing in a mixing bowl, thoughts and beliefs and behaviors that cause anxiety, right? You can also mix in the mixing bowl thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors that cause anti-anxiety. Right. Yep. And so our thoughts are literally the catalyst for this cascade that goes to that causes our feelings about certain circumstances. So how do you change, when you can't change your circumstances because they already happened, right? You can change your thoughts about them, right? You can start thinking about your thinking. My dear friend, Dr. Lee Warren, he's a neurosurgeon, and he talks about, we see Philippians 4 right in front of us when he was looking at a brain scan. And they had somebody hooked up to a brain scan, and they said to them, think about like the most depressing thing in your life, right? And the certain colors lit up in certain aspects of the brain. And then they said, okay, think about a happy time, or just a peaceful time. And the right in front of them, the colors of their brain changed just by thinking about their thinking. Wow. Right. And Philippians 4, I mean, basically change what you think about and your anxiety will go away. That's the Leanne version of that, scripture, yeah. But it's true. And that's just one example of when neuroscience and faith collide. Right. But I mean, cause God was the biggest surgeon of them all, the greatest surgeon of them all. Right. Yep. But that being said, like so much, everything starts when you just start thinking about your thinking and become aware of what you're not currently aware of. And you start shifting that. And honestly, everything else is kind of downstream. And I don't want to be negative and say like nothing will work until you do that. But you'll be stuck in the same cycle producing of thoughts, the same production of thoughts that are causing this, downward spiral until you address that. And again, you can't out diet that. That has nothing to do with food, right? But then it's like, oh, next diet, next thing, next fake it till I make it, next Band-Aid, right? And then that's actually another thing I want to say, the whole like fake it till you make it kind of, toxic positivity or fake positivity. It's like, your brain, your self-image knows that's why you have to do it from a really kind of objective standpoint and meet yourself in your doubt. Because if I'm saying to myself my whole life, like, I hate my body, I hate my body, I hate my body, but I read something on Instagram that's like, you should just look in the mirror and say, I love my body. Like, you're amazing. You're beautiful. Your self-image is going to call you on that. It's right. Not going to believe it. So that's why you have to meet yourself in your doubt and really be practical about this and not like, hyper optimistic and fake positivity around it. So that's just another piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah, there's a big difference in, really confronting those doubts and being honest about things. And, there are people who really believe in affirmations. I think there's a place for that.
They can be great.
They're very valuable.
If you believe
they need to be
them.
realistic.
Yep. If you believe, affirmations are great if they are your words and your beliefs and they align, or they cause alignment. But when we say things that we don't believe, it actually creates something called negative neuroassociations in our brain, and our brain kind of dumps it out and doesn't download it, so.
And, there's this notion, that I see a good bit. All right. So I primarily work with men, you primarily work with women, and together we're making a difference, right?
Yes.
And, one of the things I see is that it seems like we're almost held hostage in this world by our wants and our desires. So, people describe to me, hey, there is no shame and judgment here either, because been there, done that, we're in this together. But people say, hey, I've had a hard day. What do? Well, I eat my feelings, right?
Yep.
And I go in and I pig out and I, eat the bag of Doritos, or I eat, the dozen of donuts or whatever it is.
Sure.
The 12 cookies you talked about. Oreos. You don't just eat one, right?
Right.
And so, they find themselves almost in this binge, based on how they're feeling. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times we like to just kind of stay in that victim mentality of, oh, well, it's the processed food that does this to me. Now, that's a whole different story for a different day. Is the processed food bad for us? Probably. I don't think that's really an argument at this point, but I like what you're saying, because you're kind of flipping that narrative and you're saying, well, it's not even really a food problem though.
Yeah.
When you think about it, or if you believe that processed food is the only problem that we have, then you're going to stay in that victim mindset, because that's not going to change. That's only going to get worse.
If I have binge eating disorder, I will binge on that whole all natural, only peanuts jar of peanut butter too. Do you know what I'm saying? We don't discriminate when our brain is taking over. So yeah, it's so powerful what you're saying. And here's the thing. And here's what I mean when I say it's not about the food, right? Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, anything can be used as a tool or a weapon, right? Yep. I can use peanut butter as a tool, or I can use it as a weapon, right? I can use Netflix as a tool to be entertained and connect with my husband on the couch or whatever, or it can be a weapon of mass distraction. Same thing with social media. It's not that social media is bad. It's just, am I using it as a tool, or am I using it as a weapon? Right.
Yep.
And so when we think about that, then it becomes a matter of who am I being when I'm using it? and it comes back to me, right? And so here's the thing. If I come home after a hard day and I'm feeling stress, loneliness, sadness, isolation, any type of emotions, but also happiness, that statistically, these are the times when people eat, boredom, right? All of these things, right? And I have an unconscious or subconscious fired and wired thought in my brain that I don't even know is running like a hamster on a hamster wheel in the background of my mind. And it's saying, hey, Leanne, when you're stressed, food will make you feel better. When you're sad, food will make you feel better. When you're bored, food will make you feel better. Not only does it not make me feel better, but it's firing and wiring that response. And I never learn how to become emotionally available to myself when I'm stressed. And I don't have a clue how to be emotionally available to myself when I'm lonely, let alone and I say emotional, but it's also spiritually available, right? Because a lot of times it's a spiritual hole. And because when we look at it logically, I know that my boredom will never be filled by food. I know that the void of sadness will never be filled by food. We know it logically, but that's why we can't logic and reason our way through these problems, right? So it's fired and wired in our brain. Right? It got fired and wired alongside food and sugar and Netflix and whatever it is. And that's where there's no shame about it. It just is what it is. It happened. It happened to me too. Right. And that's where it's like, we don't have to like it. Like, it's not pretty. We don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that happened. But part of it is like the shame doesn't have a place there either because it just is what it is. But that being said, and easier said than done, I totally get that because shame is the thing that we're dealing with all the time when it comes to these coping mechanisms. But it's just our brain got fired and wired in a certain way. And until we learn how to actually feed our brain what it needs in those moments and become emotionally and spiritually and sometimes physically available to ourselves, right? Because physical pain is another big trigger for people to eat, until we do that and we learn those skills and we kind of like adult ourselves, we're going to keep feeling like a victim to our air quotes trigger foods or our, desires, and really ignore what our brain is actually like requiring in favor of those quick hits of dopamine.
100%. And I think, you described all of these feelings, all of these emotions that we often feel when we turn to food, right? And the thing is, we don't like to feel that way.
Right.
We experience these emotions of uncomfortability. I'm not sure that that's a word, but
it is now.
We're going to go with it.
Discomfort and uncomfortability.
And so, you said it better. Discomfort.
I make
that's the word I was looking for.
I love it. Yeah.
But so we don't like to feel uncomfortable, and so instead we seek something to make us feel better. And for a moment, perhaps that sleeve of Oreos makes you feel happy, makes you feel better. But then what happens immediately after?
Shame,
odds are
cognitive
you
dissonance.
feel guilty, right? Like, man, what did I just do? And then that shame cycle begins, and it's perpetual. All right, how do I handle now that shame is uncomfortable? And so now I've got to deal with that. It's a cycle we're never going to get past unless we do something different about it.
Absolutely. Shame. Thank you so much. Yeah. Feeling shame about our shame is a big one too, right? I'm not supposed to feel this. I know this isn't mine to carry, right? And then it makes us feel further away from God. I mean, everyone's different, right? But it's really, if I could impress upon this to anyone that's listening and that's struggling, it's like, it's not about the food. I know it feels like it is. I know it feels like a drug, but it's really in your brain, and your brain got fired and wired just like mine did. And it's fixable, right? It's healable.
Right. Where do you think a lot of that begins? I know growing up, and again, there's no shame or judgment here either, but my parents were like, all right, you need to clean your plate. If you clean your plate, you can have dessert. So it's like a reward.
Totally.
These sweet foods, these fun foods, they were rewards. They made you feel good. And so I think a lot of that's really set in our childhood, right?
Yeah. Well, this need for what we're really craving when we get those dopamine hits is oxytocin, the connection hormone. And it really actually happens when we're all teeny tiny little babies, because we cry, wah, and we get milk, sugar, right? Yeah. And so it really does fire and wire from a very young age. And then we go to the doctor's office and we get a shot in our arm. Wah, cookie, lollipop, right? So it gets fired and wired, and then it gets perpetuated, But part of it too is that, it's very like valid, and it can be helpful to acknowledge where something started. But I think what's really important is when we acknowledge like, hey, now I'm an adult and like, I don't want to be this way anymore. And so for some things, I think it's really important to acknowledge where it started. But then for some things, like, we might not ever know. Like it just is like it is like, I don't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. And now how can I learn something new? And I think one of the things that happens, at least for me, is, and I'm a big fan of therapy. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
But for this particular struggle, I've had a lot of clients that they go down the rabbit hole because it's very regressive, because it's like, let's go talk about the past and psychoanalyze the past and dig up, skeletons from the past graveyard. And it still doesn't give them the tools to heal now, And so for some of those questions of like, why am I like this? How did I get like this? Why can't I stop this? Sometimes like one of the best ways to kind of cut the shame out right there is just to say, you know what? I didn't know what I didn't know. My brain learned and like modeled and picked up something somewhere. And now who do I want to be to handle it and deal with it?
To a large degree, it doesn't matter, for you personally. It may matter in the sense
matters,
of,
but it doesn't make a difference. Like our story matters to us. It matters, but it doesn't have to make a difference in how we show up today.
There you go. Love it.
Yeah.
And so, if somebody's dealing with that, all right. So they, they're in this perpetual cycle of they get home from a bad day at work, or and that happens often. One of the ways we cope is that we go to the pantry, we go to the fridge or the freezer, whatever your vice is.
Yeah.
And
we all have our own.
And we find ourselves doing this a couple times a week or more. What would be your advice to them? Is it kind of like sitting and discovering why you have that need? Like, what are you trying to cover up? Or, what would be your advice at that point?
Yeah, great question. And part of it too is, so one of the ways this is what I experienced for myself. And then this is kind of the conversation I invite all my clients into, that the situation that you just described, coming home from work and seeing that we're feeling this kind of a magnetic pull to food, sugar, wine, shopping, whatever it is, right? We all have our own. I feel like it's a downstream symptom of a bigger problem or of a bigger cause, So the first thing I would do is I would invite them to look upstream and see that their coping mechanisms are really a downstream symptom. But that can be super helpful in the moment, because what they're trying to do is address that symptom of saying like, okay, I'm not going to keep sugar in the house, or I'm going to force myself to go call a friend or whatever it is. And that will help in the moment, but it's not going to be a long-term strategy, because your brain will come back. Like that's a very conscious logic and reason thought. Sure. And this is not a conscious logic and reason problem. So that's where I would say, like, again, that's one thing would just be to acknowledge in the moment, okay, this is just a symptom, that this is not about the food. There's something bigger that I need to heal. And that's where I, would invite people into a bigger conversation.
Yeah. And, and that's why coaches like you are so necessary, because a lot of times it takes being asked questions that we would not typically think to ask ourselves.
Amen.
In that moment, we're like, I just need food, or I just need coping. Or
exactly. I don't care. I just want it now. I don't care about the consequences, but we do care.
Yeah. And, life's busy for a lot of people, and you really have to intentionally slow down to really think about that. And so creating that space is sometimes hard on our own, but then when we start working with a coach, we have that dedicated time, and that's where we can explore, like you said, upstream a little bit. Like, what is it that I'm feeling that's causing this coping mechanism?
Yeah. And the way I describe it is you do it one time. Like, it's work. It takes it's a bit intensive. I work with my clients for like a 16-week intensive, but it's intensive on the front end so that your brain can learn it. And then you have it the rest of your life, and you're not having to think about it. And it doesn't have to drag out for years, so it's like doing the work one time so that you have it forever. But it is. And that's the part, like I said, it's not the sexy part. It's not lose 10 pounds in 10 minutes, but for those that know, like that have been struggling with this forever, it is sexy, Right.
Well, and it's getting to the root cause. And that's where I believe that all of medicine is heading. I'm convinced that a lot of modern medicine is Band-Aids. And so really what we're starting to see is this shift to, all right, well, what's the root problem? Because the Band-Aids aren't working. We see that with, the amount of, this isn't meant to be political whatsoever, but the amount of money that America spends on healthcare. Yeah. But yet our life expectancy is less than a lot of other developed countries, even though we spend way more on it. So, at some point we've got to say, all right, well, the current system may not be serving us that well, and that can be applied to ourselves, right? The current
Totally.
system I have of managing my own health is not serving me well, so I need to look deeper. And that's exactly what you're doing, this root cause, root problem. What is it that is causing this to start with that I can now begin to address? And that's not going to happen overnight. And it may be something you have to work through initially. But one of my favorite mentors says this: we need to learn to embrace the pain to avoid the suffering.
Yes, it's so true.
Yeah, you're embracing that pain of the moment of, okay, I need to find out maybe some truths about myself that, why I am the way that I am, and what do I need to do to address that, not with shame, blame, and any of that, because you're right. We can't help how our brain was wired in the past. There's no space for shame there, but I can help how I handle things from this point forward.
Absolutely. And, it's that short-term pain right now for a long-term game so that you just have it forever,
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Leanne, we might need to do part 2 of this.
Sure.
This
I'm
has
here
been
for
so
It's
fun.
Such a great conversation.
Yeah. I've got so much I want to ask you. I love peanut butter as well. And I also love The Office, which I noticed that it's on your website as well.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can have another conversation.
A shirt that I wear to the gym that's the Schrute family beet farm.
Love it. Love it.
Yes.
But I love the space you're in. I love what you're doing. You're really making a difference.
Thank you so much.
And you are marrying together faith and science to impact women all across this world.
I appreciate that.
And the thing is, you've got a method that works for you. You've got a method that works for women, but it doesn't just work for women. That's just who you work. That's who you coach. Yeah.
It was designed for women, but I have men that come to me and say, "Hey, help me!" And a brain is a brain,
Yep,
So
exactly. And there are some differences there, but not when it comes to this. And so one of the things I wanted to open up to you is, hey, I'm going to have lots of people interested in what you're doing. I just know it. How can they enter into your world? Where can they find you? Where can they find out more about what you're doing? Tell them about your podcast, all of that good stuff.
Absolutely. So, well, first and foremost, if you want to learn more about what we talked about today and really, learn how to turn off the part of your brain that is obsessed with food or obsessed with weight and really heal the disorder, rewire your brain for peace and freedom, I've literally just peeled back the curtain and walked you through the exact strategy that I teach my clients to heal themselves from that all or nothing diet mentality for good, but without restriction and without punishing your body, and definitely without using words like macros, low carb, or calorie burn. So it's all about the brain, not about the food. And you can access that over at stresslesseating.com. So stresslesseating.com, you can access that for free. If you're curious to learn more about me and my podcast, so you can, myname.com. So Leanne Ellington.com is an umbrella of everything. So I have 2 podcasts with iHeartRadio. The first one is called Outweigh, which we go I co-host it with radio personality Amy Brown from the Bobby Bones Show. And every Saturday, we just give wisdom and encouragement for women that are in that category of maybe healing from eating disorders, disordered eating, a toxic relationship with food or their body, but really wrapped around that self-image and brain conversation. It's called Outweigh, and you can access that wherever podcasts are available. And then What's God Got to Do With It is where I fuse brain science and neuroscience. Faith, I should say. Science meets faith. So it's really, there is a lot about the food and body conversation, obviously, because that's where my background is, but we cover all different subject matter, and it's called What's God Got to Do With It. If you're seeking, if you are, skeptical, maybe want to start a new relationship with God, maybe find more freedom in your current relationship with God, and you want to hear a bacon-loving, Hebrew-speaking Jew's perspective of that. It's called What's God Got to Do With It. It's also an iHeart podcast, but wherever podcasts are streamed. And again, you can find all of the things I just talked about over at LeanneEllington.com.
Yeah, I'm subscribed to What's God Got to Do With It, and it's phenomenal. You have some great guests, and then you have some solo shows too. So just really appreciate the work you're doing. Appreciate you being here with us today. What a privilege it's been. And y'all stick around. There may be an episode 2 here with Leanne before too long. So
I'm here for it. Thanks for having me, Chad. It's been great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the RevRx podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.